This is the Our Voices Matter project. I'm Anna Quon, and I'm interviewing Ruth Dorey on September 2nd, 2010 at Belmont House in Dartmouth. How are you, Ruth?
I'm great.
Okay. So, can you tell me a little bit about your family, where you were born, where you grew up, and when?
I was born in Halifax. I lived here until I was 4. Then, as my mother was living in terrible poverty, she gave 2 of her children away. And I went to live with my great Aunt Jessie in Shelburne County. It's just outside of Shelburne, and we lived on a little farm there. That was 1960, I believe.
Do you remember your life before the age of 4?
I have a pretty good memory of it, and it wasn't a very pretty thing, actually. We had, at that time, there were 4 children in the family, and my mother, as I said, was living in extreme poverty. My father had abandoned the family, and he didn't pay child support, and we were desperately poor and had very little to eat. And my mother had a mental illness and couldn't deal with the problems that she had, so she became abusive because she was like really excited and upset. And if somebody, like I was beaten a lot because she was very unhappy, and so that was a good deal of the problems that I had that started my dissociative disorder that I have.
Right. Okay. And when you moved at the age of 4, you said you went to Shelburne County?
Yeah.
And with your great Aunt Jessie?
Yes.
Okay, and how was it living with her? And did you have other sisters and brothers with you at the time?
Well, my brother went with me up there for a while, but he was a rambunctious little boy and I was a quiet little girl, so they were older people and they couldn't look after him because he had too much energy for them. But I was very quiet, so they kept me and they gave him to his grandmother. I was very brokenhearted because we were very close, so it was kind of sad.
And what was it like living with your Aunt Jessie?
It was mostly a lot of fun, and they got me a lot of toys and treated me well, physically speaking. But my Aunt Jessie had some sort of I don't know what you call it, but she thought she would come into the room when I was trying to sleep as a little girl, and she'd dress up in a fur coat and pretend she was a bear. She'd come in and she'd make growling noises. Of course, I was 4 and a half, and I figured she wasn't a bear, so but I just let her do that for quite a while. And then one day I said, "Aunt Jessie, I'm really tired. I want to go to sleep." She said, "I'm not your Aunt Jessie. I'm a bear." But after that, I guess she didn't do that anymore because I had seen through it. But she had some very eccentric ways. It was interesting. And she had a boarder there, and he was a very nice, kind man, an accountant, and he taught me a lot of stuff.
And did you see your brothers and sisters when you were living with your Aunt Jessie?
I saw them the odd time, not that many, not that much. And then there was another little brother born after I had left, so I didn't get to know him.
Okay. And what were your school years like? Can you tell me a bit about that?
I loved school in a way and hated it in a way. I was really smart and the work was easy, but I didn't like the lack of freedom that I used to have to go and sit in the seat all day, and I was very hyperactive, and if I had one finger on the desk, I thought I was sitting down. And in grade 3, the teacher kindly came to me one day and she said, "Dear, anytime you want to sharpen your pencil, you just get up and sharpen your pencil." So that was her way of helping me out with that. So it was kind of her.
What about the other children? Did you get along well with them?
Yeah, I was quite loved, even though I was the teacher's pet. But generally that person's hated, but I was loved because I'm a people person, and I like I like to be friendly with people. So they liked me.
And do you have any, did you have any friends, special friends, or like when you were in school, or, and also did you have a teacher that was especially memorable to you, or?
Well, I always thought I was a boy. And I thought I was a boy. And so I played with the boys, and I had one lady, girlfriend came over and she brought Barbies, and I was totally mystified. What do I do with these things? Anyway, but then we sat there and I said, oh, you must take the clothes off and put them on. So that's what we did all afternoon. I never really figured out the girl stuff. But we had boys, and we used to ride over things with a bike, or jump off of big things and climb trees and things like that. More adventurous. And as far as the teacher goes, there was a Mrs. Williams in grade 4, and she was just a very sweet lady. And she just, they were so motherly to me. Mostly all my teachers were very motherly. So they filled a gap.
When we talked before, you mentioned something else that your great Aunt Jessie did that was a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know what it was that made her do these things, but she would wake me up in the night, and she'd bring me into like the living room or the kitchen, and she'd make me stand under the light, and then she'd ask me questions about sex and boys and things like that. And has any boys touched you? And I'm like, yes, Mummy, a boy touched me. Where did he touch you? Oh, well, he hit me on the arm. And she'd go, well, that's not what I'm talking about. And she was trying to get me to tell her about sexual things, but I was very young and I didn't know anything about that. But this is one of the ego states that I have, which is sometimes known as alter states. She was born at that time because she wanted to help me to get back to bed, so she figured out how to answer my great aunt so that she would let me go back to bed. I don't know how she figured that out, but somehow. So that's how I got back to bed.
So that was, when you say ego states,
it's like when you have dissociative disorder, you have your mind is kind of cut up into different sections, and they're not real people, they're just parts of you, but they act like they are a real person, and they get you out of trouble or whatever. Sometimes they can get you into trouble.
Excuse me. So what time, or how old were you when those things were happening, when your aunt was getting you out of bed?
I would be like under 7, because we moved from there when I was 7. So I don't remember if she did that after I was 7 or not, but it was before the age of 7 anyways.
And I think you said you moved around quite a lot.
Yeah, we did move a lot. We moved from that little farm, and my dad was sick. He had some kind of heart problems. I called him my dad. He was our boarder. And we went into Shelburne town because it was close to the hospital. And he spent time in the hospital, and he recovered somewhat, so we moved to another farm, but it was very, very small, and we didn't do any selling or anything. We just had grew our own stuff for ourselves. So. And after we lived there about 3 years, then we had to move back in town again because he was sick again.
And did you go to different schools when you moved?
I went to a lot of different schools. I really liked Ragged Island School. That's way out in the sticks. I don't know where it is, but it was like the kids were fun there, and we had a lot of woods. We'd go in the woods and play at dinner time, and it was like a very, very nice little country school. Beautiful.
And did moving around a lot or going to different schools influence you in any way?
I used to be able to make friends very quickly, and everywhere I went I had a lot of friends, so it wasn't very traumatizing like it might be for some people. I found it interesting, and meeting new people was great for me. So yeah.
When you were young, did you have any mental health symptoms, and also did you have any physical problems?
Well, I was very thin when I went with my to live with my great aunt because we hadn't had much to eat, and I was physically ill from that, and I couldn't go to school when I was 5. The doctor said I had to wait till I got my weight back up where it was supposed to be. And I had a lot of, I didn't know what it was I had, but it was something like depression. And I'd be, you know, playing baseball one day, and all of a sudden I'd go, I don't really feel very good, and I'd say, I'm going home, and then I'd go home and I'd go crawl in my bed, and I'd stay there for days. And my mom and dad would try to, well, Jessie and Hartley would try to figure out what was wrong with me, but they didn't know much about mental illness, so they just kind of waited it out. And when I got out of bed, I was just the same as ever. I come downstairs and go, oh, I'm hungry, Mom, and they give me breakfast or whatever. But I really should have had some kind of counseling, I think, at that time. So it wasn't really the way it is now, because you never figure a child in those days needed assistance, because it wasn't very popular, I guess.
And about how old were you when all that was happening?
I was like 8 or 9 when I started doing that. So.
Okay. Were you ever institutionalized as a young child, or like in an orphanage or a training facility?
No.
Or anything? I want to ask you about your mental health history and encounters with the mental health system. You mentioned that you were 8 or 9 when you first experienced some depressive episodes.
Yeah.
Can you remember when you were diagnosed and what your symptoms were?
Well, I was like 21 when I kept going to the doctor. I didn't have the words to talk about what was wrong with me. I didn't have the vocabulary. I'd go to the doctor and I'd say, you know, I don't feel good. I don't know what's wrong with me. And he'd say, can you tell me more about it? I said, I can't tell you. I just don't feel good, because I had severe depression, but I didn't have the words. And finally, I don't know exactly what happened, but I got into some kind of a crisis, and I ended up at the doctor's office, and he's like, what is the matter? And I told him what was the matter, and he said, well, you just seem to be suffering from some sort of mental illness. I'm going to send you to a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist, who only came to town once a week, happened to be in that evening, and he sent me right down there. So, and I had severe amnesia. So this is when I went in there, I had severe amnesia. And he's like, "What? Tell me about your life." And I'm like, "I don't remember a thing about it." So, well, I was diagnosed with some kind of depression, but really it was dissociative amnesia. Later on, I found out it was dissociative amnesia.
So, that first experience with the psychiatrist, was it a positive or a negative experience?
In a sense, I found him very monumentally unhelpful. But I was so angry because he was monumentally unhelpful that I started working on myself. I said, well, if you're not going to help me out, I guess I got to work on my own problem. And I learned to be responsible for my own learning process. So that was good. Not from, despite his lack of ability as a psychiatrist to help me.
And was there anything that helped you? You said you did a lot of learning on your own. Were there particular books or anything else?
I read every book you could get on. I joined the psychological book club or whatever it was. I don't know, some kind of thing. And I kept getting these big tomes in the mail, and they were like the diseases of this and that and the other thing, and the DSM-4 and all this stuff. And I was reading through it, going, oh, that's fascinating. So I think I knew too much because I was always arguing with the doctor.
And were there any people in your life that were helpful or harmful at that time?
I was always very alone, it seemed like to me. Maybe I wasn't, but it felt like it. So, because I didn't feel anybody would understand what I was going through. So I didn't say much about it.
Did you ever have experiences with the police or authority outside of the healthcare system?
I had my children were taken from me because of, you have a mental illness, you're not proper to look after children, you don't have the ability. But yes, I did, but they took them anyway. They had them for 3 months, and then the judge returned them to me, said he didn't see any reason why I couldn't have them. So was pretty upsetting, really.
Yeah. How old were you then?
Let's see, I was about 27. My children were 9 and 6. So they weren't like little babies.
And what was your interaction like with, was it the police or the authority, or what authority?
The Children's Aid Society.
And were they, did you find them easy to deal with, or?
I found that I wasn't equipped to deal with them. I didn't understand where they were coming from at all. And all my friends thought they were crazy because they had taken the little people from me, you know. They're like, well, what are they taking them from you for? Because you're an excellent mother. But I had a lot of resentment, and there's quite a few people that just because they have a mental illness, they lose their children. It isn't because they can't look after them. That's pretty, I don't know now, but it used to be a pretty normal thing back when I had children. If you were diagnosed that you pretty well lose your children.
Right. So did you have your children before you were diagnosed, or after? Before. Okay, of course. That's right. And excuse me, did you finish high school? I didn't ask you.
I didn't finish it at the time, but I took the GED when my little one was about 2, I think, and I got through it pretty good. So I got my GED.
Okay. And were your children sons, daughters?
2 boys.
Two boys. Okay. Excuse me. So when you were first diagnosed with depression, and then later with dissociative disorder, did you take medications or any other treatments?
Well, I took medication, but I almost, like, they gave me some kind of antidepressant and I couldn't wake up. I took one and I was asleep for 24 hours. And my children were running in the house loose for 24 hours, and they were quite small, and I didn't know where they were. And I said to the doctor, I can't take these because I have children to look after. And he says, you have to take them. You have to take them. I want you to take them. So I went home and I took them, and I was asleep for days. And my friend finally came over and banged on the door and says, what kind of pills are you on? I said, the doctor gave them to me. She says, will you take them and throw them in the garbage? So I didn't take them anymore. So.
And how old were you then?
I think I was like 22, maybe 23.
And sorry, you said you were diagnosed with depression when?
21.
21. And then with dissociative disorder?
I was 41, I think, something like that.
Oh, okay. So, did you have any good support in your life at that time, or not?
No, I had people more or less were very difficult, and it was a small town, and they didn't like people who had children and weren't married, and they would come up to me and say nasty things, and they say, oh, I don't like paying taxes, so people like you get money, or things like that. It was like really quite horrible, actually.
What town was that?
Shelburne.
Okay. So, you lived in Shelburne when you had your children.
Yeah.
Did you move?
I moved when the welfare office took my little children. I went and moved to Cape Sable Island, and that's an interesting place, Cape Sable Island. It's windswept kind of place, kind of really cool there. It's not hot in the summer, and it's nice.
Is it Nova Scotia?
Yeah.
How long did you live there?
I was there for 9 years. The people were very, what would you say? Some people say clannish. They don't make friends with outsiders, and you're an outsider until you're like 3rd, 4th generation or something. So my children were not well accepted there, really. So you're from somewhere else.
Right.
Yeah.
So where did you move after that?
Well, my young people were now teenagers, and we moved to Winnipeg. That was 1993. And I got a job in a fabric shop, and it was badly paid and not not a great job, but it was a job. And then I went into, I had clerical training, so I got a job as an accounting clerk. That was better paid, but then my grandmother fell down and fell down in her house in Nova Scotia and she broke her hip. So I was on a term position there, and when the term position was over, I came back home to help her out. So that's how I got back here.
Okay. And where in Nova Scotia did she live?
She was on Cape St. Island.
Oh, okay. Getting back to your mental health experience, so when you were 21, you were diagnosed with depression. You were taking antidepressants, but then you stopped taking
Yeah.
them. What happened when you stopped taking your medication?
Well, my depression continued quite seriously for probably a year or more, I think. It was really, really bad.
Were you ever hospitalized?
Later on, I was, I don't know what year, but it was several years later, I went into the Dartmouth hospital. And they gave me a different antidepressant, and it worked a lot better, and it didn't do anything much to me as far as over sedating me or anything like that. So that was good.
And what year was that, or how old were you then?
My kids were teenagers, I'm not really sure, maybe 1990 or something like that.
And did you find that hospital experience positive or negative?
Very positive. I had been in the NS hospital, and I found it treat you like a little baby, and like you don't know anything, and everything you say is not important because we're the people that know everything. But I didn't find that in the Dartmouth hospital. They treated me like an ordinary patient that had an understanding of my own illness and things.
Right.
I wasn't there very long, but I was pleased with the atmosphere there.
And when was it that you were admitted to the Nova Scotia hospital?
I was 24, and it was around October, and I was in there for, I was supposed to be there a long time, but I escaped. I decided I didn't like it there, so I went home. So just went up and got the bus and went home. So they were very pleased with me, but too bad.
So was that before you were in the Dartmouth hospital?
Yeah.
Okay. And were you admitted for depression?
Yeah.
Okay. And your children were living with you at that time?
They lived with my grandmother while I was in there.
So your first hospitalization in Dartmouth hospital?
That was it. The first one was in the NS hospital.
Oh, sorry, that's right. When you were about 24, you said?
Yeah.
Okay. And then how old were you when you were admitted to the Dartmouth?
Oh, I think it was 31 or 2, something like that.
Did you have any other hospitalizations?
I had some very short-term ones at the NS hospital after I had moved to Dartmouth. And, what year was that? 1997 I moved here, and I spent, see, with dissociative disorder, they aren't allowed to keep you in there very long because it's counterproductive. They just keep you in there till you settle down, and then they let you out again.
Right. And when was it that you moved to Dartmouth?
97.
Did you ever have any other mental health treatments?
Oh yes, no, I haven't had that, but I went to drug dependency because when I first came here, I would go to different doctors and I'd say I was having a problem, and they go, well, you're not having a problem. And I go, yes, I am. And they'd go, no, you're all right, go. And so I said, well, it looks like the government's putting quite a lot of money into drug dependency. I think maybe I'll go try that out, see if I can get some help there. Even I was smoking like a chimney, but other than that, all the drugs I'd ever taken, I hadn't taken that many, but I knew what it was about, but I hadn't really been a real drug addict. But I was a terrible smoker, so I said, well, I can go in there and I'll just tell them that I'm a drinker, so they won't know. So that's how I got referred to a psychiatrist that dealt with dissociative disorders, because I was making very little progress before I went there and lied. But I didn't want to lie, but that was like the only way that I could see that I could access mental health care.
And how, when you were referred to the doctor who diagnosed you with, did that doctor?
Yes, he did. Like I did 2 really long interviews, and I did written tests and all kinds of things, and it was like quite a process. And I got diagnosed in 1998 with dissociative disorder.
Okay. And when you were diagnosed with dissociative disorder, did your treatment change, like your medication?
He would not let me have any medication whatsoever. I say, look, I'm really depressed. Can I have some antidepressants? He'd say, antidepressants will interfere with your therapy. I can't give you any. So I had to do this. I said, this is surgery without anesthetic, I said. And he's like, nope, you can't have anything. So it was awful. It was awful. Anyway, but
how many years did that go on?
It took 5 years.
And was it helpful, even though it was awful, or?
Well, it was very helpful, but it was a very painful process, because like when you have nothing to take the edge off, it's every time you have a depressive feeling, you have to keep it. So then you have to deal with the issues. You say, well, I've got to deal with the issues because there's no other way to do things. So, yeah.
And what was the kind of therapy, the psychotherapy you used with you?
Okay, well, it's called ego state therapy, and it's getting to know these different ego states, and you talk to them, you write down what they say, and you have, it's like a family conversation, and then you kind of have to stop calling yourself we and start saying I, and embracing those parts of yourself that you were unable to deal with. And it was very hard. And some of them are like fairly violent, or they're very depressed, or they're you know, they hate people, or they don't, you know, I can't believe that all these pieces make up a human being. But now that I'm pretty well integrated, and I feel, we'll say I feel angry at somebody. One time I would have said, I don't feel that, and I would have thrown it onto this other part of me. But now I go, yes, I guess I am angry, and it's taking responsibility and embracing the emotion that I couldn't before. So that's interesting.
Yeah. Excuse me. Do you find that your life is different having gone through that 5 years of therapy?
Yeah, it's much different. I'm a lot different because when I first went to therapy, the only thing I wanted to do was get rid of them, get rid of all these people, get rid of them. But if you don't embrace them, they'll stay separated and cause you great misery, because they can be very rude to people. You know, oh, did I say that? And now I can think before I speak. I say, well, I feel very angry at that person, but I'm not going to cause any problems. Whereas before, because I wasn't connected to it, I couldn't stop it. If I was going to say something evil or bad to somebody, it would just come out, and I go, oh, I'm really sorry afterwards, but after you've said something, it's a little late.
Do you still see the same psychiatrist who diagnosed?
No, he and I we didn't see eye to eye. Because I said, you don't really know me. He said, yes, I think I understand you well. I said, well, I don't think you understand me at all. And we had a little bit of a disagreement. So, but these things happen.
So what happened when you left his practice?
Well, that was the end of it, because I didn't really have anybody much after that. So I have not to do that sort of therapy, but like to check in and stuff and see how you're doing. But they don't know the depth of what I've been through, really.
Right. So you're saying the therapist that you see now doesn't know you well?
Well, I don't know. You really have to. I don't know how you get to know anybody, really, if you just met them once a month or something. It's not the same as if you're seeing somebody once a week.
When you were going through your the ego state therapy, were you seeing your doctor once a week?
Yeah, and I had a therapist at drug dependency also. She was very, very important to my treatment, because she was very gentle and that's something I needed at that time. And she was very motherly. And he wasn't very motherly, believe me. He was intellectual, but she was more embracing and caring, and I needed that a lot right then. So
how would you characterize your experience your mental health right now? Like,
well, I'm not a very happy person, but I'm a hopeful person because I always think, you know, something good will happen. But I'm having a difficult time because I've just lost my mother, and there's been some family problems and things. And I have some physical problems. I have quite severe diabetes and stuff, which I worry about a lot. So these things are kind of bringing me down, but I still have a hopeful attitude. And I have some really good friends and things. And like to have more and deeper friendships and things. But those things you have to, you don't just get them. You have to work at it. So.
When you said your mother died, do you mean your biological
yes.
mother?
Made a bit of family friendship. Because I happened to say that she abused me, and some of them weren't aware of that, and so they were mad at me because I said that. But they were my little brothers and things that weren't there when it happened. So.
Right. So what are the supports in your life like now?
Well, I'm very self-supportive, I find, and when I don't get support, I can kind of call back on my memories of support, and I remember when so-and-so said this nice thing to me, or that. It's like I've got a collection of things, what would you call it, nurturing kind of things that have happened in the past, and I try not to forget them. And a lot of times when you go through life, there's no support or nurturing for days and weeks and months. But if you've got experience of it and you can remember that, it's almost as good. So.
Did you ever experience any patient rights issues when you were hospitalized or otherwise?
Not really. Just like I say, when I was in the ENS, I don't know what it's like now. They kind of talk down to people quite a bit. So I didn't feel that was particularly wonderful.
Do you have any support, like housing support or other kinds of support?
I'm still on social assistance, and I do a little bit of work now and again. I work for a fellow up in Burnside doing casual labor, and I'm doing personal projects like I like to do writing projects, and I've got a YouTube channel, and I make little films and put on there and stuff, and it's fun. I like creative outlets. I'm trying to exercise, but that's a hard one. Do you have any, I know you said you wished you had sort of deeper friendships, but are there people in your life that are very important to you right now? I guess I'm wondering about your relationship with your family and friends, and whether there's people who are therapeutic for you. I think just getting out and seeing anybody, for me, having a social, happy kind of day is good. I have a few fairly close friends, but they're not, you can't discuss, with these friends, I can't really discuss if I'm really depressed. I don't feel like putting that on them a lot of times because they're having their own problems, and I don't want to overclog them too much. So there's not many I can speak to when I'm feeling really bad. So I don't know, really. I just talk to myself best I can. What about do you have a GP? I do not. So can I ask who prescribes your medication? Well, I go to it's the walk-in clinic in Burnside, but I used to have a doctor there, but she went away and they never gave me another doctor. And do you find them helpful, or? I find they're very difficult to explain anything to. They don't seem to get it lots of times. So what impact has having a mental illness had on your relationships? You mentioned about your friend not wanting to put a burden on them. Has it made it more difficult for you to establish relationships? I think I can establish a relationship really easy, but I'm afraid that if I reveal my real self, maybe they'll be overwhelmed, tired, not interested. It's more like I'm thinking before they can tell me. It's like I'm thinking, well, you're going to reject me, so I might as well not go too deep into showing you who I really am. So I just well, I hope I can overcome that. So we'll see.
Living in the community, what is your life like in the community today?
I feel fairly well respected. People seem to like me quite a bit, and I'm very glad about that. And I think I have kind of a personality that can get along with people pretty good.
Right.
Just don't cross me. No, just kidding. Anyway.
And when you say people seem to like you, do you mean, who do you mean exactly?
Well, people that I meet, people at my social club, and if I'm wherever, if I'm doing a little course or something, but the people seem to take to me quite a bit. And my boss likes me, and my co-workers like me and stuff. So they're glad to see me come in. You can tell they're glad. They're like, oh.
And I'll ask you about your job in a bit, but you mentioned the social club.
Yeah.
Can you tell me more about that?
The social club, it's the CMHA, Among Friends Social Club. And it's a place where we just sit down, we might play a game, and we go places. We go to the movies, to the beach, different things. We have a van provided to us from McPhee, and we can take that van twice a week and go somewhere. So we go quite a few different places. And it's like a family. You go in there and somebody's kind of grumpy, and somebody's kind of happy, and somebody's having a problem, and somebody's, it's kind of a family atmosphere. Families don't always run smooth, and sometimes you go, oh, why do I go there? Everybody's so grumpy on certain days. And then you go, yeah, well, it's like a family.
Are there other organizations you belong to in the community?
Well, I work for United Way, doing an inspirational speaker circuit. And that's, we're going out and telling the organizations that we talk to what the money's used for and how it helps the community. So that's pretty interesting. I get to do public speaking, which I love to do. I don't know if people are scared to death, but I like it. Yeah. I don't get too nervous about it.
Okay. Is there anything else that you find or that you do for either leisure or work activity?
Well, I try to get to make some film footage often, and I go home and play with it on the computer and stuff like that. And I like to do computer games. If I feel really awful when I wake up in the morning, I'm kind of like all out of sorts, and I get up and play the computer game for half an hour before I go out, and it's an easy world to deal with, because if I do this action, this thing's going to happen. It's not like the real world. If you do a certain thing, you don't know what's going to happen. So games are easy to deal with.
Right. Do you have any housing support, or?
Well, I do. I get from social assistance some of my rent. I have to come up with the rest of it, but I do that with the job that I have. So.
I guess I'm wondering if you have an agency that sort of supports you.
No.
Okay. Have you experienced any other kinds of emergency help, like soup kitchens or food banks, shelters, police lockup, mobile crisis?
I have been in a shelter before, because I was out of work and I lived in my car, so I came and I lived all over the place anyway. So I'm driving around and I ran out of money, so no way to make any when you're on the road. So I came and lived in the Edson House shelter in Halifax.
When was that?
That was 1997 when I first moved here. So.
And how did you find that experience?
Well, I was quite upset and not very well mentally at the time, and I found it didn't help. It was like there were so many people there running around, and I was so upset. And I didn't start to get better until I got my own place. It was a little tiny little place, but it was quiet and it was mine. And then I started to heal a little bit.
Right. And Where was that?
Just up the road here, not too far from where we are.
Okay. You mentioned that that was the place you started healing.
Yeah.
Why was it a healing place for you?
Well, I find it difficult to live with other people because, I don't know, they seem to want everything I don't want, and I want everything they don't want or something. And cross, what do we call it? Cross purposes. And when I'm by myself, I can be very calm, but when I'm with somebody else, I find I get very excited easily. So I'm like, wow, how did I get so excited over that little thing? They say some little thing, and I'm like, ah! And when you're home, you're not so much, and you're by yourself, you're not so much like that. I really like being like that. But that's my personality, so I got to deal with it.
Do you consider yourself to have a spiritual life?
Well, I have a difficult spiritual life because I do believe in God, but then I'm like, God, why are you doing this? A lot of my spiritual life is, God, why are you doing this? And it's still a spiritual life anyways. But I enjoy nature, so that's good.
What kinds of things do you do in nature?
Well, I love to be out in the woods, but I love the woods. It's great out there. Beautiful trees and beautiful lakes. And a lot of birds, and sometimes you might see a deer or something. It's nice.
So, what about your personal life these days? I guess intimate partners or your relationship with your children, your family, kind of thing.
Well, it's very changeable. I don't have much interest in having a boyfriend, but if somebody special came along, I wouldn't be upset about it. But I find family life is difficult because it's like revolving relationships. Like sometimes I'm getting along good with somebody, and then the next week I'm not, and then the next week I'm back to good, and then somebody else in the family and I are not getting along. There's a lot of not getting along, and I'm always going, what did I do? Why are they mad at me? So,
can you tell me about your job?
I do some leather work, and I work with fur for Highland Outfitters. They make kilts and sporrans and bagpipes and all kinds of things. And I do my work at home, and I go up there a couple times a month to take it up.
Okay. And how did you get into that line of work?
I went to Lake City Woodworkers, and they gave me a test to find out what I was good at, and they gave me the job that I was terribly bad at. It took me so long. I can't even do some of the things they asked me to do because I'm not handy. And so they put me into handcrafts, although I'm not very bad at it.
Well, but you say you have good, you mentioned your boss.
They're great people, great people. That's why I stay. If they weren't the wonderful people that they are, I would have probably said, I'm not doing this anymore, and went and did something else. But I didn't want to lose the great work atmosphere.
Right. Can you tell me about any hobbies you have?
I think my main hobby is taking photographs. I take a lot of photographs.
Yeah.
I got thousands of them on the computer. Probably I should get rid of some of them, but
Yeah.
it's nice. It's got pictures of just about everything around here. You know, in future, historians will be looking at my collection and saying, ooh, oh, these are great, yeah.
And you were part of a film project in North Dartmouth.
It's called the North Dartmouth Film Project, and we made a film. There were 9 of us, and total we made 3 films. But our group made a film about the history of Dartmouth, how people used to live, and their recreational activities, and what it was like in the, I think, the 30s, 40s, 50s. It was supported by the government and United Way, so they gave us a pretty good amount of money to do that, so we did okay.
Yeah. Now you mentioned that you're a social assistant.
Yeah.
Do you experience challenges related to poverty?
Well, I'm not a person who wants tremendous amounts of money. I'd like to have a car. That's out of my range, but I enjoyed it when I used to have a car. And that's about the only thing I mourn over. And I do find it's difficult because I have to prove every so often that I am incapable of working full time. And that's difficult because with no GP and all that, I'm worried that it's coming up soon, and I'm like, who am I going to get to sign this paper? And I don't know yet, so we'll see. But that causes me a lot of nervous tension and upset. So.
Have you experienced other challenges, for example, transportation, or what you mentioned about the car?
Well, if I want to go out of town, there's really basically no way to really do it. So.
Right.
But I have a bus pass, and I use it well.
Has the way your mental illness been viewed, been treated, changed over time, or like when you first were diagnosed, I guess, was the attitudes you encountered different than now?
Well, I don't know. I don't know that they've changed very much that I can tell. Because I think a lot of people, they think that's the whole person. When, oh, you've got a mental illness, you can't know too much, or you're not bright, or it's more they mix it up with not being intelligent or something, and they can't believe that you have normal intelligence or something. A lot of people.
Have you ever faced discrimination due to your mental illness?
Not really, I don't think. But like for getting jobs and stuff, it hasn't been a problem.
Can you actually, we'll go back a bit, can you tell me about some of the other jobs you've had?
Oh, let me see. I've done a lot of things. I've done a lot of volunteer things. I trained horses as a volunteer. That was fun. That was a long time ago. And they needed someone to train horses, so I went and helped them. And I try to do a lot of things for the community if I see that somebody needs a volunteer, and I have the time. I would do it. Sometimes I overextend myself a bit because I find I'm kind of getting a little nervous because how am I going to get this done? How am I going to get that done? Right. And I have to be a bit careful of that. Right. And other jobs I've done, I really like doing accounting because I click a lot of numbers in and the paper comes out and it's correct, and I'm like, oh, that makes me feel good. The same number on this side as that side, and that's an accountant's heart. When I went to school for business, you go into the lunchroom and some people were like, and you knew they were not in balance. They didn't have the right numbers.
When was it that you took that business course?
That was, let me see, 1986 or 87.
And where did you take that?
I was the first graduate of Nova Scotia Community College because right after they changed it, just a few days, I had finished my course and I got my graduation like, I don't know, 3 or 4 days since they changed it. So, yeah.
It used to be the vocational school.
Yeah, when I started the course, it was vocational school. When I finished it, it was community college.
Right. So, have you had a lot of different kinds of jobs in your life?
I haven't really worked very much. It's the longest job I ever had was like the one I've got now. That's only casual. The longest job before that was 9 months. I worked in the fabric shop, and then the next one to that was 5 months, and they weren't very long. But I didn't have that many because I was usually sick, and I couldn't stand. My nerves was too bad to take a job.
Right. Now you mentioned to me earlier that you have a good relationship with your dad.
Yeah.
So your biological dad?
Yeah, that's my father. And I was proactive, and I went and found him, and I was 41 at the time. And I went in the house, and I said, hi, Dad. And I said, are you my dad? And he said, well, I think so. And his wife at the time, we got talking, and she's, oh my goodness, you're just like him. you two are just alike. And we were joking around and go, oh, I can't believe it, you're just like each other. It was nice. We were just laughing, it was so wonderful.
And where does he live?
He lives in Winnipeg. Although there were moments that my heart was broken and I couldn't deal with the situation and I couldn't go see him. But then as the years went by, I got now so that I don't feel so much pain from his abandonment. At first it was difficult.
Yeah. And what about with your sons?
Well, my youngest one called me last night. He was right. I said, who is this? Because I hadn't heard from him for so long. I'm like, who is this? So he said, it's me, Mom. I'm like, oh, wow. So we had a little chat. He's pretty cool. He won't take a vacation. I said, when are you going to take a vacation? Oh, I can't take a vacation, Mom. They can't do without me.
Where does he work in?
I don't know the place that he works, but he's head of security, and they can't do without him.
Okay. And where is that?
In Winnipeg.
Okay.
And the other guy, ooh, he's got some sort of, what's it called?
You mentioned autism.
Autism, that's the one. He's got some sort of autism, and he's kind of hard to communicate with, but he's a good guy under it all. He just can't communicate well.
And he lives
about a 10-minute walk from me.
So I asked about your experience of life now. I guess I'm interested in your quality of life.
I find it's lower than I'd like it to be, because I don't have much joy, and I get up and I'm like, I feel terrible, and then I have to go do something to cheer myself up, and then I get cheered up, and I'm still not as happy as I'd like to be. So.
What do you think could make you happier?
Well, I think if I maybe lost some weight and was healthier, I might feel better, because I worry about my health quite a bit. But I've got some kind of compulsive eating thing. I know you're not supposed to eat this, but I eat it anyway.
You're not supposed to eat it because of your diabetes?
Yeah.
Okay. Excuse me. I know you said you didn't feel that the attitudes towards you and your mental illness had changed over time. Do you see the stigma associated with mental illness as having changed?
I think there is some enlightenment, because one time nobody knew anything about it. They just said, oh, that person's crazy. They've been to the NS hospital. Don't talk to that person anymore. But I don't think you'll find that as strong now. You'll find a larger proportion of people in society understand that it can happen to anyone.
Right. And how long has it been since you were in hospital?
Oh, it's been quite long now. I think probably 6 or 7, 8 years. I'm not really sure.
Health or recovery for you? Or like in the past, were you in and out of hospital?
No, I wasn't really in the hospital very much. Most of my suffering was at home.
What about, have you heard much about the involuntary psychiatric treatment?
I have heard about it, and I'm really glad I'm not in the position to have to be taken away involuntarily, because it seems very cruel to me, and not very. It's not like they're being realistic sometimes, because a person that isn't hurting anybody shouldn't be forced in there, shouldn't be forced to take drugs. I don't think you should force people to take drugs, because that should be their choice.
What about other developments like the Mental Health Commission of Canada?
I've heard of them, but I don't really know too much about it.
Yeah. Do you belong to any mental health organizations besides the Among Friends Social Club?
No.
Okay. So, do you describe yourself as a mental health consumer, or would you choose other words?
It's according to who I'm talking to, I guess. It's almost like you can't get well, because if you get well, then you, like me, if I get well and I say to everybody I'm well, they'll say, well, then you don't need any more financial support. So I have to be careful that I even if I was perfectly well, I have to have time to get work. I don't feel that, when I was in Manitoba, there was a different understanding of people don't necessarily go right from being ill to being well, and now you can work a 40-hour job. But I think here they think when you're well, oh, get out to work 40 hours. And I personally can't work 40 hours.
Right. Do you find that's the attitude of community services?
Yes, very much. I think I don't feel supported. I feel that they will cut me off like that if they have any reason, like if they have any suspicion that I could work more than I do, that they just cut me off. So, I don't know.
You're also volunteering for this project, the
Yes.
Our Voices Matter project. How did you get into that, and how are you?
Well, I love to listen to people's stories. I love listening to older people tell about things they did in their life, and it's just a fascinating thing, and I think it's going to help probably students a lot to get to know that there's real people there who they're not weird, or they've had some bad experiences and some hospitalizations and things, and that doesn't make them any different than other people. So that part of the project is interesting to me.
Excuse me. It sounds to me, you said that you are quite self-supporting as far as your mental health is concerned. What kinds of techniques do you use to keep yourself well?
When I wake up and I usually feel terrible when I wake up, and I'll meditate. My meditation is loving kindness, goodness, healing. I say that 10 or 12 times. Mm-hmm. That brings a beginning of calmness to me. And then I usually run for my computer and put that game on that I play. Because like I say, it's easy to deal with a game because it's always the same. You get the same reaction no matter what you do. And then after, sometimes it takes me half an hour, sometimes an hour, and then I say, well, I feel like I can get breakfast now. And I use self-talk. I talk about, well, the weather's nice, or there's probably something fun to do out there. Oh, I don't have to feel depressed because there's lots of people out there for me to talk to, and then I psych myself up to have a good day. So that's just as good as antidepressants. It might not be as, it's a little slower sometimes, I think. I don't know. But it works.
You mentioned that to me earlier, that your emotions can change quite quickly. How do you deal with that?
I usually embarrass myself. I tend to, when I feel my emotions are overwhelming me, I'm going to be saying something nasty or grouchy, then I go home. I'm not putting this on anybody else, because I'll just go home and deal with this, and when I've got it settled down, then I'll go right in.
What advice do you have for people living with mental illness and for people involved with the mental health system?
I think you have to find your own way. You can not take everything seriously. That if a doctor tells you, you've got this problem, this problem, this problem, this problem, think for yourself, is that the real problem? Maybe there's other aspects that the doctor can't see. He's not the expert on you. You are the expert on yourself.
And what advice would you have for health professionals, mental health professionals?
Well, I think people are looking for kindness before treatment, kindness and care. I think the treatment is important, but if the person feels cared for, the treatment will work a lot better.
Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you think we should touch on?
Well, I think some of the reason people have mental illness is because it's a difficult world. And I get existential angst. I can hardly say that. It's like because I see how the world is, and it bothers me, and there's not a lot you can do about a lot of problems. You can only pray about them or try to get people to work on them or something. I think it's a whole world problem. If the world was a beautiful and good place, we'd have very little mental illness, I think. So we've got to work toward a really good world.
And how do you think you're working toward that world?
I am definitely working toward it because I make my thoughts conform to godly thoughts. And if I think something I'm doing is not godly, I stop myself as long as it might take. I work on it. I'm not going to do this thing because that brings evil to the world, or I'm going to give more. And how can I give more? I think, how can I give more? And just keep trying to be the best, kindest person I can be, hoping to influence other people.
Well, thank you, Ruth. I wonder whether there's other questions I haven't asked you, but I think you've done a really good job of just explaining.
Well, I've certainly enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're signing off. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.